A miracle of the Virgin Mary took place inside the ICU of a hospital in Chicago, at 3 a.m., when most of the city slept and only the machines kept vigil. A skeptical nurse saw something impossible, a woman in white standing beside a dying patient, and yet, the cameras showed no one there. Her life, and her faith, would never be the same again. But before we continue, leave a comment below telling us where you're watching from, and what time it is right now. I'd love to see how far the miracles of the Virgin Mary are reaching. The ICU of St. Raphael's Hospital was a world of quiet chaos, humming machines, flickering monitors, and that strange rhythm of hope and despair that only night nurses know. The fluorescent lights washed everything in pale blue, making even the living look ghost-like. And in the middle of that stillness moved Nurse Claire Donovan, her footsteps soft but certain, her mind focused, her heart long ago sealed against belief. Faith, for her, was something that belonged to other people, the ones who still lit candles, whispered novenas, or looked for meaning in the pain. She had stopped doing that years ago, on the night her mother slipped away while Claire was still on shift. Since then, the word miracle had become just another sound, hollow and useless. Her patient that night, Anna Rivera, was 57, a mother of 2, and dying. The doctors had said she wouldn't last until sunrise. Multiple organ failure. No response to treatment. Even the machines seemed tired of trying. Claire stood by her bed, adjusting the 4, her movements automatic, muscle memory after years of repetition. The clock on the wall read 3:07 a.m. The hallway outside was silent. And then, something changed. She didn't hear a sound, but she felt it, a shift in the air, like warmth spreading through cold water. She looked up, and for a moment, her breath caught in her throat. A woman stood at the bedside. Not a nurse. Not a visitor. A woman in white, her figure soft, almost luminous, as if made of the very light that filled the room. Her head was bowed, hands clasped as though in prayer. Her face. Claire couldn't quite see it, yet she felt seen. Known. She blinked once, and the figure was still there. Twice, and she was gone. The monitor beside the bed let out a soft chime. Anna's heart rate, which had been dangerously low for hours, was rising. Stable. Steady. Impossible. Claire backed away, her hand trembling against the rail. She checked the hallway, empty. No one had entered or left. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Get a grip, she muttered to herself. You're exhausted. You're seeing things. But the warmth remained, lingering in the air like a breath that hadn't yet faded. When her shift ended, she couldn't let it go. She went straight to the security desk and asked to see the camera feed from room 304. The guard scrolled through the footage, yawning, while Claire leaned in close, her eyes fixed on the screen. There she was, moving around the bed, checking the 4, writing notes on the chart. And then, nothing. No figure. No shadow. No movement that shouldn't be there. Claire frowned, rewound, watched again. Still nothing. The moment she remembered so clearly was invisible on the footage. The guard shrugged. Maybe you caught a reflection, he said. Or maybe, she whispered, the camera wasn't meant to see her. She left the room without another word. At sunrise, the ICU stirred awake. Doctors made rounds, the day nurses clocked in, the world went back to being ordinary. But when Claire returned to room 304, the impossible had happened again. Anna Rivera, the woman who was supposed to be gone by now, was sitting up in bed. Her color had returned. Her eyes were open, clear, alive. Claire nearly dropped the clipboard. Mrs. Rivera, she said softly. Can you hear me? Anna smiled faintly. I can. Her voice was weak, but her words were certain. She told me I would. Claire froze. Who told you? The lady, Anna whispered. The one in white. She was standing here. She told me it wasn't my time. That I had to go back. Claire's mouth went dry. Did you see her face? Anna's eyes filled with tears. I couldn't look straight at her. It was too bright. But I knew it was her. Her. Claire echoed. The Blessed Mother, Anna said simply. The Virgin Mary. For a moment, Claire couldn't move. The hum of machines faded, the world seemed to narrow into the space between them, the believer and the skeptic, both standing in the shadow of something neither could explain. Hours later, Dr. Elias Monroe, the attending physician, reviewed the case. Her kidneys were failing, he said, flipping through the chart. We were prepping for palliative care. Now she's stable. That's statistically impossible. Claire met his gaze. So was last night. He raised an eyebrow. You think this was divine intervention? I don't know what I think, she replied. But something happened. Dr. Monroe gave a skeptical half-smile. Something always happens in hospitals. People die, and people live. That's all. But even as he spoke, the disbelief in his eyes flickered. He couldn't explain what the data on his chart already admitted: the woman who shouldn't have survived had come back. And deep inside, Claire knew this was only the beginning. By the time morning light spilled across the skyline of Chicago, word of Anna Rivera's recovery had already begun to drift through the halls of St. Raphael's. Nurses whispered about it in the break room, doctors exchanged uncertain looks during rounds, and every few minutes someone asked Claire, half joking, half afraid, "So what did you really see last night?" She wished she knew. Her shift was over, but she couldn't bring herself to leave. Sleep felt impossible, her mind kept replaying the same image, the woman in white, silent and radiant, standing beside a dying woman who now lived. She sat in the hospital chapel, a small, dim space tucked between the cafeteria and the west wing. The stained glass windows caught the first rays of sunlight, painting the pews in fractured blues and golds. Claire hadn't set foot here since her mother's funeral. Now, she just sat there, staring at the flicker of a candle, trying to make sense of something that refused to be analyzed. Maybe exhaustion. Maybe hallucination. Or maybe, and this was what terrified her most, it was real. At 10 a.m., Dr. Elias Monroe called her into his office. His tie was loose, his coffee cold, and his tone skeptical. So, he began, the patient who was supposed to die is alive. Congratulations. The family's calling it a miracle. Claire folded her arms. You don't believe that? I believe in data, he said, tapping the medical chart. The body doesn't heal because a ghost decides it's not time. She wasn't a ghost, Claire replied quietly. Monroe looked up, eyebrow raised. Then what was she? Claire hesitated. I don't know. But I saw her. He sighed. Look, Claire, you've been working nights for 3 weeks straight. It does things to the mind. Let's just agree she got lucky. Lucky, Claire repeated. That's one word for it. She turned to leave, but as she reached the door, Monroe said, almost to himself, still. I've never seen kidney function rebound like that. Not once. His voice trailed off, uncertain for the first time. The following night, the whispers had spread. Nurse Angela Ruiz, who covered the evening shift, claimed she felt something strange when she entered the ICU, a warmth, she said, like someone was there before me. Another nurse, Marcus Lee, admitted that one of his patients, a man barely conscious, had asked him, "Who was the lady praying by my bed?" Claire said nothing. But inside, something stirred. She decided to check the footage again. This time, she went alone. The security guard hesitated. You really think you'll see something new? He asked. I don't know, she said, but I have to look. The grainy black and white footage rolled across the monitor. Claire leaned close. The timestamp blinked, 3:07 a.m., the moment she remembered. There she was, bending over the bed, adjusting the four, stepping back. And then, a flicker. A distortion in the frame, like static in the shape of light. She hit pause. The guard squinted. Probably a glitch. Maybe, she whispered. But her heart knew otherwise. By the end of the week, Anna was walking. She smiled at everyone who entered her room, clutching a small rosary her daughter had brought her. "I prayed every night," Anna told Claire. "But I never expected her to come." Claire tried to keep her voice steady. "What exactly did she say to you?" Anna thought for a moment. "She told me not to be afraid. That she was here for all of us. And that I'd see my children again." She smiled faintly. She had such peace about her. Like she knew everything would be all right. When Claire left the room, her hands were shaking. That night, in the cafeteria, she sat across from Father Miguel Alvarez, the hospital chaplain, a man whose gentle voice had comforted countless families in their final moments. She told him everything: the light, the woman, the camera that saw nothing. Father Miguel listened without interruption, his weathered hands folded on the table. When she finished, he nodded slowly. "There have been others," he said softly. "Places of suffering often become places of visitation. Lourdes, Fatima. Even here, in hospitals." "You think it was her?" Claire asked. "The Virgin Mary?" "I think," he replied, "that heaven sometimes walks where it's least expected. Where faith is weakest." Claire stared at him. "Then why me?" He smiled faintly. "Because you stopped believing. And sometimes, that's where miracles begin." For the first time in years, Claire found herself unable to explain the world she lived in. She had witnessed resuscitations, cardiac arrests, recoveries beyond logic, but this was different. This wasn't the victory of medicine. It was something else. Something that reached beyond what her mind could measure. When she left the hospital that night, the city lights shimmered through the mist. She paused by the curb, the sound of distant sirens echoing through the streets, and whispered into the wind, "If it was you, why me?" No answer came, only the hum of the city, alive and unaware that somewhere in a hospital room, a miracle might still be unfolding. And as she turned to leave, a faint scent of roses, soft and fleeting, brushed past her in the cold night air. Days passed, and the story refused to fade. Within the white walls of St. Raphael's, whispers became rumors, and rumors became quiet prayers muttered between shifts. Some called it divine intervention, others called it coincidence. But no one could deny what had happened: a woman who was meant to die was alive. For Nurse Claire Donovan, the miracle had followed her like a shadow. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that soft light again, the gentle curve of the woman's form, the calm that filled the room like sunlight pouring through stained glass. She wanted to believe it had been real. She wanted to, but faith, once broken, does not return easily. By the end of the week, hospital administration had stepped in. The ICU staff was gathered in the conference room, the air thick with unease. Dr. Monroe stood near the front, his tone clipped and professional. "We will not," he said, "spread unverified stories about supernatural events. The hospital is a place of healing, not hysteria." Someone in the back whispered, "Tell that to room 304. Laughter, nervous, brief, rippled through the group. Claire said nothing. Dr. Monroe's eyes found her. "Nurse Donovan, you were the attending nurse the night of the incident. You'll note in your report that there was no unexplained presence." "Agreed." The room fell silent. Everyone waited for her answer. Claire's throat tightened. "I'll note what I saw," she said evenly. His jaw clenched. "Then I suggest you saw nothing." That night, Claire couldn't sleep. The city outside her apartment buzzed with rain and the low hum of traffic. She sat by the window, watching the droplets trace paths down the glass, each one catching a glimmer of the streetlights below. Her mother's rosary, the one she'd packed away years ago, lay on the coffee table. She reached for it, hesitated, then closed her hand around it. The cool beads pressed into her palm like a pulse from another life. "Maybe I'm losing my mind," she whispered. Or maybe. The word miracle caught in her throat. She couldn't say it yet. Not out loud. The next day, something changed. Ana Rivera's vitals plummeted again. Within minutes, the ICU filled with alarms, doctors shouting orders, nurses rushing with defibrillators, the mechanical rhythm of CPR filling the air. Claire ran into the room, adrenaline flooding her veins. Time of arrest, 9:12 a.m., someone called out. Anna's body jerked as the paddles delivered another shock. Nothing. Another. Still nothing. Dr. Monroe leaned over the bed, sweat on his brow. "We're losing her." Claire's voice broke through the noise. Again. The defibrillator hummed. Clear. Another jolt. Then, flatline. Silence. Dr. Monroe stepped back, his voice low, defeated. Time of death. Wait. Claire's hands trembled. She didn't know why she said it. Didn't know where the courage came from. But she stepped forward, pressing her hands together, her voice barely a whisper. "Please," she said. "If you're real, help her." The room went still. And then, as the monitors pulsed one last steady tone, a faint scent filled the air, not of antiseptic or medicine, but of roses. The heart monitor beeped. Once. Twice. Then again. Dr. Monroe froze. "Wait, she's..." Anna gasped. Her chest rose sharply as air filled her lungs. Her eyes opened wide. The impossible had happened twice. Later, when the room cleared, Claire sat by Anna's bedside, still shaking. Anna's voice was hoarse but steady. "I was gone," she whispered. It was quiet. Peaceful. And then she came. Claire leaned closer. "The same woman?" Anna nodded weakly. She said, "It's not over. You still have something to give." Claire felt tears sting her eyes. "Did she tell you who she was?" Anna smiled faintly. "You already know." By evening, the hospital was buzzing again, not with machines, but with whispers of faith. A priest had been called in for consultation. Father Miguel arrived, quiet and unassuming, with his rosary wrapped around his wrist. When he entered the ICU, he stopped mid-step. "Do you smell that?" Claire did. The scent of roses still hung in the air, faint but unmistakable. He looked toward the empty space beside Anna's bed. "When she appears," he said softly, "she leaves a fragrance that no flower can imitate. Lourdes. Medjugorje. Fatima. The same scent, always the same." Dr. Monroe stood by the doorway, pale. "You can't be serious." Father Miguel smiled gently. "Science studies the visible. Faith studies what remains when the visible ends." Monroe had no reply. That night, Claire returned to the chapel. It was empty, quiet, lit only by the soft glow of votive candles. She knelt for the first time in years, unsure of what to say. "Why me?" she whispered into the silence. "Why show me something I can't explain?" Her voice trembled. "I wanted answers, but all I have are questions." A soft draft moved through the room, flickering the candles. The scent of roses returned, faint, fleeting, yet unmistakable. And in that moment, though she saw no one, Claire knew she was not alone. The miracle couldn't stay contained. In the age of social media, secrets traveled faster than prayers. Within a week, whispers turned to headlines: the Chicago ICU miracle. People gathered outside St. Raphael's holding candles and rosaries, pressing photos of loved ones against the hospital gate, begging for healing. Reporters hovered at the entrance. Some mocked. Some believed. Everyone wanted to see the woman in white. Inside, the hospital was unraveling. Security had to escort people from the lobby, nurses were fielding calls from strangers across the country. And at the center of it all was Claire Donovan, the nurse who saw what no camera could capture. She hadn't spoken to the press. She barely spoke to anyone at all. Every hallway she walked down seemed to hum with speculation. People stared. Some smiled, others crossed themselves. She was starting to feel less like a nurse, and more like a witness to something she still didn't understand. Late one night, Claire sat in the staff break room, staring at the window's reflection. Her face looked tired, hollow. The clock ticked 2:43 a.m. The door opened quietly. Dr. Elias Monroe stepped in, his expression unreadable. "You've become famous," he said, trying for humor but landing somewhere near exhaustion. "I didn't ask for that," she replied. He poured himself coffee. "No one ever does. But the world needs miracles, I guess. Especially when it can't explain its own pain." Claire watched him carefully. "You still don't believe it?" Monroe took a long sip, eyes fixed on the steam rising from his cup. "Believe it or not, I've been reading about Marian apparitions. There's a pattern, you know, suffering, hopelessness, then something impossible happens. But I'm a scientist, Claire. I'm trained to doubt what can't be proven." She leaned forward slightly. "And if proof came to you, if she stood right in front of you, what then?" Monroe hesitated. "Then I'd have to change everything I know about the world." "Maybe that's the point," she whispered. He said nothing more. 2 nights later, at exactly 3 a.m., a power surge hit the ICU. Lights flickered, monitors froze, alarms beeped and then fell silent. Nurses rushed to stabilize equipment. Claire, instinctively, went to room 304. Ana Rivera was awake, her eyes wide, her hand reaching toward the corner of the room. "She's here," she whispered. Claire's breath caught. The air thickened with that familiar scent, roses and rain. And then, she saw her again. The same woman. Dressed in white. But now, her face was clear. Her eyes, impossibly gentle, immeasurably sorrowful, met Claire's. Her presence wasn't frightening. It was overwhelming in its stillness, like being seen by eternity itself. Claire took a step forward. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice shaking. The woman raised her hand, not in warning, but in blessing, and placed it over her heart. "You will understand," she said softly, her voice more like music than speech. "When you believe." And then, the lights returned. The hum of machines resumed. The woman was gone. But this time, something was different. The security cameras, which had gone black during the surge, rebooted seconds later. And on the recording, just for a moment, a single frame of light shaped like a human figure stood beside Anna's bed. It lasted less than half a second. But it was enough. By morning, the hospital was in uproar. Technicians analyzed the footage frame by frame. Some claimed it was lens flare, others a data glitch. But there was no source for the light, no reflection, no technical fault to explain it. Dr. Monroe watched the footage in silence. For the first time, his voice trembled. "That's not possible." Claire simply said, neither was she. Word spread fast. Pilgrims arrived from out of state. Some came in wheelchairs, others carrying photos of loved ones. The chapel overflowed with candles, rosaries, and the soft murmur of prayers that didn't stop, day or night. And yet, amid the commotion, Claire felt something shift within her. It wasn't pride. It wasn't fear. It was surrender, the slow, quiet acceptance that not everything in this world was meant to be explained. That evening, she found herself walking through the darkened hospital corridors, drawn again toward room 304. Anna was asleep. The monitors blinked softly. The air felt different. Claire sat in a chair beside the bed and closed her eyes. She whispered the only prayer she remembered from childhood, the one her mother used to murmur while brushing her hair. "Hail Mary, full of grace." Her voice broke before she reached the end. Tears fell. Not of grief, but of release, the kind that comes when a wall finally cracks and the light gets in. When she opened her eyes, she noticed something glimmering on the edge of the bedside table, a single white rose, fresh and dewy, though there were no flowers anywhere near the ICU. She lifted it gently. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel alone. The miracle of Saint Raphael's did not fade with the dawn. It spread like a whisper carried by faith, subtle, persistent, unstoppable. Newspapers wrote headlines, television anchors debated, and skeptics filled forums with theories. But among believers, it wasn't the footage that mattered. It was what happened afterward. Ana Rivera, the patient once clinging to life, began to recover at an impossible rate. Doctors couldn't explain it. Her scans showed healing beyond anything medical science could predict. Her lungs cleared, her heart strengthened, and within weeks, she was sitting upright, smiling faintly at every nurse who entered. "Do you remember what she said?" Claire asked one afternoon, holding the patient's hand. Anna nodded. Her voice, weak but steady, replied, she said, "You will not leave this place the same." I think she meant both of us. The world outside the hospital didn't understand what to make of it. Some dismissed it as hysteria. Others called it divine mercy. But for Claire, the change was deeply personal. She returned to the chapel often now, the same place she once avoided. Each time, she would sit in silence before the small statue of the Virgin Mary placed near the altar. It was old, its paint chipped, its hands slightly cracked, yet the eyes seemed alive, compassionate, unchanging. She didn't come to ask for proof anymore. She came to give thanks. There were nights when she stayed long after the last candle had burned out, whispering prayers for patients, families, even for those who would never believe. Because she understood something new now, miracles weren't meant to divide believers from skeptics, they were meant to open hearts. And hers had finally opened. A few months later, Claire received an envelope without a return address. Inside was a simple photograph, the ICU hallway bathed in faint light, and near the end, a shape resembling a woman in white. No explanation. No message. Just the image. She smiled. She didn't need words. The same day, she visited Anna, who had finally been discharged. The older woman was standing by the hospital entrance, sunlight spilling across her face. Anna reached into her bag and handed Claire something small, a rosary made of translucent beads, its cross shimmering faintly in the light. "It was on my nightstand that morning after she came," she said softly. "I think it's meant for you." Claire held it, the beads cool against her skin. The scent of roses lingered, faint but unmistakable. Time passed. The hospital returned to its rhythm. Patients came and went. The headlines quieted. But every year, on the anniversary of that night, the staff noticed something strange. At exactly 3 a.m., the monitors in room 304 would flicker briefly, and for a few seconds, the air would fill with the soft fragrance of roses. No malfunction. No explanation. Just silence and peace. It became a quiet tradition among the nurses. Some would pause whatever they were doing, bow their heads, and whisper a small prayer. Even Dr. Monroe, still skeptical but humbler now, made sure to be there each year, standing in the doorway, eyes glistening with something like reverence. He once told Claire, "I don't know what happened that night. But I can't deny that something, or someone, wanted to be seen." Claire simply smiled. "Maybe that's what faith is, Doctor. Learning to see without needing proof." Years later, when Claire finally left St. Raphael's, the chapel statue of the Virgin Mary remained in its place, surrounded by flowers and rosaries left by visitors. Some came to pray for healing. Others came out of curiosity. But all left with something they couldn't quite explain, a stillness, a warmth, a peace that lingered long after they stepped outside. The miracle became more than a story. It became a living memory, a reminder that even in the most sterile corners of human suffering, grace can find its way in. And somewhere in Chicago, on quiet nights when the city lights dim and the wind hums through the hospital's old corridors, there are those who swear they've seen her, a gentle figure in white, standing beside the beds of the sick, whispering words only the soul can hear. So, if you ever find yourself doubting that heaven listens, remember this: sometimes miracles don't come to prove anything. They come simply to remind us that love, divine, unseen, unending, still walks among us. And perhaps, even tonight, she does.